rights. In this chapter, we will be studying about the rights of the people here. Now, before entering in this chapter, let us quickly take an overview. As we know that in the previous two chapters, we have looked at the major two elements of a democratic government. In chapter 3, we saw how a democratic government has to be periodically elected by the people in a free and fair manner. In chapter 4, we learned that a democracy must be based on institutions that follow certain rules and procedures. These elements are necessary but not sufficient for a democracy. Elections and institutions need to be combined with a third element, enjoyment of rights, to make a government democratic. Even the most properly elected rulers working through the established constitutional process must learn not to cross some limits. Citizens' democratic rights set those limits in a democracy. This is what we take up in this final chapter of the book. So, we begin by discussing some real life cases to imagine what it means to live without rights, and this leads to the discussion on what we mean by rights and why do we need them. As in the previous chapters, the general discussion is followed by a focus on India. We discuss one by one the fundamental rights in the Indian constitution, and then we turn to how these rights can be used by ordinary citizens and who will protect and enforce them. Finally, we will be taking a look at how the scope of rights has been expanding. Okay, so now life without, first is the life without rights. In here, in this book, we have mentioned about rights again and again. And if you remember in the chapters, in the four preceding chapters, chapter number 1 was about a comprehensive definition of democratic includes, right? And in number 2, in chapter number 2, what happened was we saw that our constitution makers believed that the fundamental rights, about the fundamental rights. In number 3 chapter, we saw that every adult citizen of India has the right to and to be with, the rights and the constitution, what are their thoughts. And in chapter number 4, we have learned if a law is against the constitution, every citizen has the right to approach. So in this place, let us now begin with the three examples of what it means to live in the absence of rights. let's Let us study now. Okay. So the first topic in here is life without rights. The three examples that will make us understand the absence of rights. The first one is prison in Gautama Bay. Okay, so in here, the American government picked up about 600 people from all over the world and put them in a prison in Gautama Bay, alleged without due process the law. And the government said that they were enemies of the US and linked the to the attack on New York on 11th September 2001. Okay, we will be learning a little about him again. Just a second. Okay, so now I hope you can see. So, what is this about? What happened in here? So, you see that Gautama Bay is an area near, Cuba, which is controlled by the American Navy. So, after the September 2001 attacks on the United States of America, about 600 people were arrested by the US force and were imprisoned in Gautama Bay. So, these people were arrested without any warrant and without informing their families. So neither the family members nor the UN members were allowed to meet them. So the prisoners neither faced any trial before any magistrate in the US, nor could they approach the courts in their home country. An international human rights organization, Amnesty International, collected various reports on the Gautama Bay prison and reported the torturing of the prisoners, which itself violates US laws. So prisoners were not released even when they were, declared not guilty. The US government did not pay any heed to the UN Secretary General, who said that Gautama Bay should be closed down. Okay, so in here we understand what happened, right? So you understand? So these were actually against the rights of people which were denied by the US Gautama Bay incident. Okay, next, uh, let's again a little bit talk about more. Let us know more about this incident, what happened here. So, what happened here was that a government fails to be a democracy if the people don't enjoy any rights. Okay, so after the 9 by 11 attack on the New York, the US Defense Forces captured 600 people from all over the world and secretly held them captive at a prison in the Gautama Bay, and were tortured and treated inhumanly. So these prisoners were held captive without any judicial intervention, and an international human rights organization, which is the Amnesty International, reported. You see here, it's written Amnesty International. This was reported. However, the US government did not release them in spite of the UN intervention. So, what happened was President Barack Obama has promised to put a stop to this inhuman act. The UN Secretary General ordered the sealing of the prison. Now, at the same time, what happened? Saudi Arabia was another. Here, Saudi Arabia was very another a topic or an example. Here you see citizen rights in Saudi Arabia. So these were some of the citizens' right which I am going to now tell you. So Saudi Arabia was another prominent example of people leading a life without rights. So Saudi Arabia is ruled by a monarch, and the people of the country cannot form any political parties or initiate any political campaigns against the ruler. So people of other religions than the Muslim living in the country are allowed to follow their religion in private but not in the public. What happened was that women in the country don't enjoy the same status as men. Okay? So what happened was in 1999, Milosevic was elected as a representative, as you all know. Okay, so there was some network issue, connective issue. We will be back again. So what happened was that in 1999, Milosevic was elected as a representative of the people in Kosovo. It was a province of Yugoslavia before it split. His motto was to make Yugoslavia a country dominated by the Serbs. So he wanted that other ethnic minorities should either leave the country or bow down before the Serbs, and he hence became hostile to the Albanians and started killing them. So the Serbian troops continued this massacre under the leadership of Milosevic until other countries in the world intervened. So Milosevic was tried in the International Court of Justice for his inhuman acts, and human beings crave for a insecure, dignified, and fair judgment. So in total, what happened was there were some citizens' right, as you see, citizens' right in Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, the position of the citizens were with regard to their government, as I'm going to mention right now. Okay, so the rules were that the country first is that the country is ruled by a hereditary king, and the people have no role in electing or changing their rulers. Number two is that the king selects the legislature as well as the executive. Number three, citizens cannot form political parties or any political organizations. There is no freedom of religion. And number five is that women are subjected to many public restrictions. So this was the third, sorry, the second example of this democratic rights. Okay, so now what were the basic? Can we know what are the basic, at least the basic rights of a citizen in a democracy? All the citizens have fundamental rights such as the right to equality, right to freedom of religion, right to constitutional remedies, right against exploitation, cultural and educational rights. The citizens can follow the religion, education, culture of their choice and will get equality. So democracy means equality. The people should be equal. Now this country in this country, so in this country, Saudi Arabia, the king selects the legislature. There was no freedom. Non-Muslim residents can follow their religion, but in public, not in public but in private. The women were subjected into many public restrictions. The testimony of one man is considered equal to that of two women. So here it means that the people of Saudi Arabia, was no equality there, right? Okay, so the next one that we will be studying is ethnic massacre in Kosovo. Now, what happened in there? In this massacre in Kosovo, Yugoslavia was a small province before its split, and the population was overwhelming ethnic Albanian, but Serbs were in majority in the country. Milosevic, a Serb nationalist, had won the election, and his government was very hostile to the Albanians. So he wanted the Serbs to dominate the country, and many Serb leaders thought that ethnic minorities like Albanians should either leave the country or accept the dominance of the Serbs. Okay. So in here, what do we learn? Let us see. In this, the people started to believe about them. So in here, what happened was that on May 14th, 1999, during NATO's air campaign against Yugoslavia, Serbian security forces descended on the small village of Huska in western Kosovo. The armed men rounded up the villagers, all ethnic Albanians, killing some and demanding money and valuables from the rest. So, this a series of war crimes were committed during the Kosovo War early in 1998 to 11th June of 1999. The forces of the Slobodan Milosevic regime killed many Albanian civilians and explained them during the war alongside the widespread and destruction of civilian, cultural, and religious properties, right? So this is the meaning that the what happened was that a total summary of it is that they entered the houses of that province and they destroyed it. The but the Serbs were the majority in the country, entire country. So when a narrow-minded Serb nationalist Milosevic won the elections, he wanted the Serbs to dominate the entire country. So hence the Albanians were demanded to leave the country, and the ethnic massacre was carried out by the country's Serbian army itself. So they entered the houses of the Albanians and brutally attacked them, forcing them to leave the nation. And this massacre was considered as one of the worst killings based on ethnic prejudice. Finally, Milosevic lost his power and was put to death by the International Court of Justice. Next, we will move on to the next topic. Here, I think we have. Now, here is a small question from Check Your Progress. Let's do this. If you can do. Okay. So, in this progress, for each of the three cases of life without rights, mention an example from India. This could include the following, which has the newspaper reports on custodial violence, newspaper reports on force feeding of prisoners who go on a hunger strike, then ethnic massacre in any part of our country, and then reports regarding unequal treatment of women. Now, you need to list the similarities and differences between the earlier case and the Indian example. So, it is not necessary that from each of these cases you must find an exact Indian parallel, but you need to find it. Okay. You need to find it. Copy. Let me just copy this. Okay. Uh, I'll give you some few more seconds so that you can write it down. Okay, so I think I'm getting some answers here. So I'll write the answer here. Okay. So in the first example that we had already learned, which was prison in Gautama Bay, right? We have learned about the prison in Gautama Bay. We will be doing that. Okay. So, Indian example compared to prison in Gautama Bay was about the news report in the Hindu newspaper, which was dated 20th October 2006. Now, CBI to probe custodial violence case, according to the petitioner, there was a petty quarrel between her children and her neighbor's children on 5th February 2004, for which the latter preferred a complaint with the police. Due to the correction from the complaint's relative who worked at the Tamil Nadu house in New Delhi, the police summoned the petitioner and her husband S. Anna Kodi to the police station on the next day. Mr. Anna Kodi was brutally beaten up by the uh, sub inspector there, and he was produced before the judicial magistrate and let out on bail the same day. Immediately, his wife took him to a private clinic where the doctor advised her to admit him in the general hospital. As Miss Munia Mal did not have enough money, she took her husband back home where he died at 2 a.m. on 8th February. So similarly, there is a custodial violence cases in both cases. Okay, now this was this is the first one. So I took one of them. I now will be differentiating them. Now the differences of this, now let me write it down first and then I'll go with the differences. So this is just the what happened. This was the storyline. Okay. Now, the differences. What were the differences in this? The differences were, first is that the violence in the Indian case is in the police station, whereas in the first case it was in a prison. Number two is that in the Indian case, the person was visiting the police station on a summon, whereas in the earlier case, the prisoners have been illegally detained in a prison. Okay, so this were the differences of the first part. So this were the differences of the first part. Now the second part. Now the second example is that Indian example compared to citizens' right to Saudi Arabia. In here, a news report in the Times of India newspaper dated 6th August 2012, gender discrimination say women candidates. Bhopal, the number of women candidates who were not called for interview despite scoring high marks than male candidates was 109. The CM added and also tabled in the assembly the list of all such women and candidates along with details of scores, ranks, and addresses. It's a typical case where men have benefited from reservation meant for women, says one of the candidates, Sunita Jain. So, who hails from Ratlam. She had complained to the National Women's Commission state Women's Commission and made representation at all levels, pointing out that keeping higher cut of marks for women candidates and lower cut of marks for men amounted to gender discrimination. Now, in number two, these were all the things. Now, what were there were no similarities, right? There were no similarities as we can see in the previous one, as I have already said, that there was the similarity of the custodial, you know, similarity of in the both cases, that there is a custodial violence in both the cases. Let me write it down for you. This was the similarity. Okay. In the second case, where the citizens' rights in southern Saudi Arabia, here there are no similarity. There is not a single similarity, but there are difference in the Saudi Arabia case, that the women are subjected to restrictions, and also the testimony has half the value of men's testimony. So in the Indian case, women were discriminated against by keeping higher cut of marks for them compared to the men. So let us write down here. Okay, so this is the write up if you want to see. Okay, so this is number two, the number of women. as I'm saying, I'm also writing, so it is very very difficult for me to do like this. I'm just doing a little bit of, you know here it is. Okay, so in here we get to see about the uh, Saudi Arabian people. Okay, next is about number 3. The third is that the Indian example, compared to ethnic massacre in uh, Kosovo. A news report from Reuters dated 29th August 2012, Indian politician found guilty of murder for a role in bloody massacre. A former Indian state minister was found guilty on Wednesday of murder in one of the country's worst religious rights and the highest profile conviction in a state that casts a shadow over the country. And 10 years on, human rights groups say about 2,500 people, mostly Muslims, were hacked, beaten, and burned to death in Gujarat state after a suspected Muslim mob burned alive 59 Hindu activists and pilgrims inside a train in February 2002. Similarity in both cases are that the minority people were massacred, and the difference in the case of Kosovo is that it was organized by the government and executed by the soldiers, and in the Indian case it was done by a mob which was instigated by some people who were in the government. So these are the three answers. Okay. Okay, so these are the examples. I hope you liked my video. So this is all for today. uh, Thank you for watching. If you like my video, please like, share, and subscribe, and hit the bell icons. Whenever I'm online, you can learn with me too. Thank you and have a nice day. Bye bye.